Welcome to today's deep dive. It really sounds like two completely different worlds, doesn't it? But they are incredibly connected. Have you ever wondered how a conflict over in the Middle East could actually dictate the fate of American farmers while at the exact same time handing a massive geopolitical advantage to China? Well, today we are unpacking some fascinating analysis from Dr. Pakorn Gachali that reveals the hidden gears turning behind this global crisis. And I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you are absolutely not going to look at the global economy the same way again. Okay, let's dive into this. When we start talking about global leverage or superpower advantages, what usually comes to your mind? Probably microchips, cutting-edge tech, rare earth minerals, or just massive military strength, right? That's what we always hear about. But Dr. Gotchalie's beta flips this completely upside down. The real new geopolitical power card, it's not high-tech, it is literally dirt, fertilizer, and soybeans. I know, it doesn't sound quite as cool as a stealth fighter jet, does it? But believe me, this is the real deal. Section 1. The hidden power card beyond tech and military. So the ongoing Iran crisis is exposing this absolutely critical vulnerability in the global supply chain, and honestly, most of us never saw it coming. To really grasp this, we have to rethink the Strait of Hormuz. We almost always hear about this place when crude oil prices are jumping around, but in reality, it's not just a route for crude oil. It is a vital global artery for exporting fertilizers and the essential chemical precursors needed to make them. When this shipping lane gets threatened, it doesn't just shake up the price at the gas pump. It literally shakes the very foundation of global agriculture. Section 2. The Hormuz fertilizer shock, a global chain reaction. Let's move to and see how this builds step by step out in the real world. This whole chain reaction kicks off with step 1, disruptions right there at the Strait of Hormuz. That immediately triggers step 2, where the costs of gas and those essential chemical precursors just spike entirely out of control. Naturally, that leads us right into step 3, where global fertilizer costs shoot up. And the final result here in step 4, which is the absolute tipping point of this whole thing, is that it forces a physical change in what farmers actually decide to plant in the ground. And what's really notable here is that the shockwave of these rising fertilizer prices doesn't hit every farmer equally. Not at all. Crops that demand heavy chemical fertilizers, they quickly become financially unsustainable. They simply cost way too much to grow. Meanwhile, crops that require far less fertilizer, like soybeans, suddenly become the most cost-effective, logical choice. So this crisis isn't just making your groceries more expensive. It's actively dictating the physical seeds farmers are putting into the soil. Section 3. The China Paradox, the illusion of immunity. Now, what's really interesting about this data is that you might think China, being this massive global player, is just sitting back comfortably controlling the whole game. But to look at this totally impartially, we have to recognize that while China might be pulling some strings, they are bleeding money too. Just look at the trade data from March 2026. It is incredibly revealing. You can see this massive divergence. China's export growth was surprisingly sluggish at just 2.5%, way below market expectations. But then, look at the imports. They absolutely skyrocketed by 27.8%, hitting a multi-year high. That is a massive signal. Look really closely at this 59% figure. This is just a staggering number because it represents the massive increase in the value of China's fertilizer imports. It clearly shows us that those skyrocketing global energy and commodity costs, yeah, they are flowing right back into China, putting severe, intense pressure on their own domestic economy. But you have to contrast that massive value spike we just talked about with this 27% figure. This is the actual volume of fertilizer China imported. So the physical volume only grew by 27%. Think about that. When you're paying nearly 60% more in value but getting less than half of that increase in actual physical product, the reality becomes glaringly obvious. Surging prices are driving this, not some genuine boom in demand. This is textbook cost-push inflation, and it's hitting the Chinese economy hard. So the whole idea that China is completely immune to this crisis, it's definitely an illusion. Even with taking that financial hit, China is executing a very careful balancing act. They aren't some untouchable superpower here. Actually, it's more like they're a cautious game maker, carefully assessing the board. Their absolute top priority? Securing domestic raw materials and tightly controlling the pace of their exports to ensure internal stability. Because for them, internal stability is everything. Yet, even while protecting their home turf, they are still strategically maintaining select partnerships, like their fertilizer exports to ASEAN nations. It's a very calculated move to maintain regional leverage despite the broader global crisis. Section 4. The soybean trap, the farmer's dilemma. All right, so we've looked at the big macroeconomic board and China's strategy. But let's bring this right down to the dirt level. Put yourself in the work boots of an American farmer right now. This intense pressure on fertilizer prices, it didn't just happen overnight. Farmers have been battered by compounding geopolitical crises for years now. Pre-2022, input costs were pretty much at a standard baseline. Then, the 2022 Ukraine-Russia crisis caused inputs to spike dramatically. And now, in 2026, the Hormuz disruption is adding the most severe pressure yet. It leaves farmers operating in an almost impossible economic climate, just completely desperate for a way to survive. And that impossible climate, it forces a decision based entirely on financial survival. On one side, you've got corn and wheat. These are crops that demand heavy fertilizer. So with soaring input costs, planting these means you are looking at razor-thin margins, or honestly, outright losses. On the other side, you have soybeans. By their very nature, soybeans require far less fertilizer, making them significantly more cost-effective to grow. For a farmer who is really just trying to keep the farm afloat, soybeans become the only logical option. So, the crucial point that ties this whole explainer together is this naturally occurring geopolitical trap. Think about it. The more soybeans local farmers plant just to survive the cost crisis, the more they have to rely on the world's biggest buyer of soybeans to purchase that harvest. And guess who that buyer is? It's China. In this wild twist of fate, the desperate survival tactics of local American farmers are inadvertently strengthening China's leverage on the global stage. All of this data really leads us to one highly provocative question. In a modern war of global resources, where every single thing is so deeply interconnected, who really holds the ultimate power? Is it the one who controls the high-tech weapons or the one who buys the harvest? It's an incredibly complex reality with no easy answers, but it completely redefines how we look at leverage today. Thank you so much for joining today's deep dive, and we'll see you next time.